Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series as we're back here for the fall 2023 semester. And we are joined by the paralegal program coordinator at Sheridan College, Michelle. So, Michelle, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and maybe a little background on the paralegal program at Sheridan College.
Sure, JP. Thank you very much for having me, for inviting me. I'm excited. I've seen some other Sheridan attendees on this podcast, and I'm also nervous. It's a little different than a thing that I'm used to. So, Practice Management for Paralegals is my textbook. I wrote it even though I've never ever run a practice, first of all, and I'm a lawyer, not a paralegal. And I've been a lawyer for more than a quarter of a century. And honestly, I think the thing that prepared me most for the teaching that I do is my undergraduate degree of English and creative writing. So oddly enough, which you'd think that might be completely impractical, it's worked out really well from a teaching perspective. And I have to tell you, my master's is not in law, it's in English. So English was an interest for me, and I really missed it in law school. I missed reading for pleasure, for intellectual reasons other than legal reasons. And I went back and did a master's as quickly as I could in 8 months because I didn't get the articling job that I wanted to get. I got interviewed by a lot of firms that specialized in corporate commercial law, and that's just not me. To this day, that's not me. So I've had a really non-traditional route into teaching. I've worked at not-for-profits, and I worked in legal publishing at pretty much all the legal publishers for except the tax one for years and years.
Yeah, so I mean, that's certainly an interesting path there. And so, what kind of got you into teaching and then coordinating the paralegal program on top of that?
Sure. So teaching was, and I had always wanted to teach. I thought I would do bar admission course teaching, actually. When I was being interviewed for articling positions and they asked that, what will you do in 5 years question, teaching was always on my list. But I thought, well, I better say in the context of bar admission, because then I'll only be away a little while and a firm can support that. So I was being strategic. And then I was out for lunch. Oh, years later, I was working at a not-for-profit. I was out for lunch with a friend who taught at Humber, which is where my teaching career began. And Humber was looking to hire. And I said, oh, I would love to teach. I have a 4-day-a-week job, and I'd love to teach on the fifth day. And essentially, I thought I was going for an interview at Humber, and I was handed course material for a course starting the next day. And then when I started to teach, there was a strike, and nobody told me if I was supposed to go in or not go in. And I didn't want to cross a picket line, but I didn't know what to do. And no one was communicating. So I went in, and then I taught at Humber for, I think, 9 years before they realized they had never actually observed me teaching. And they came in and observed me. But I was teaching to accounting, marketing students. I was teaching business law, torts, and contracts. So I stumbled into teaching, but I'd always wanted to do it. And then I wanted to teach paralegals, which is why I started to teach at Sheridan as well. And I wanted to teach people who are already interested in the law. I wanted that level of engagement that our students give us. So then I started working at both Sheridan and Humber on a partial load basis. And in my personal life, I adopted a daughter. And when I felt that she was old enough and the timing was right, positions opened up at both Humber and Sheridan, full-time positions, and I got the Sheridan one. And very happy to be at Sheridan. So that's been about 8 years of full-time at Sheridan, a lot of teaching before that. And then the program coordinator role was another one of those things. It's a pass the potato. Maybe it seemed that it was my turn. Our previous program coordinator had been in the role for 9 years and did an exceptional job and really transitioned me into the role. But it happened right around COVID, kind of right before COVID. So it was baptism by fire, as the expression goes.
Yeah, so what's I mean, maybe talk a little bit more about the program there at Sheridan and kind of given the pandemic and we had transitioning, I think, almost across the board to remote learning, and now there's still pilot projects, which is kind of funny because we had the pilot project I thought was the pandemic, right? But still more now in terms of kind of hybrid, right, where you can have a few classes in some cases remotely, but the vast majority of things have returned back to campus. And I mean, I think, especially the last 2 weeks, probably busy, the campus life, right, that you see a
Yeah.
lot of students on the campus, excited new students starting the program. So yeah, maybe anything you could share for any of your students who might be listening, whether you're your own students or any students in other classes, and especially the ones that are just starting their 2-year program.
Sure. Yes. Sheridan's is a diploma program. It's 2 years. As you mentioned, we have intakes in the fall and also in January. And if you start in January, you are taught throughout the summer. And if you start in fall, you get a summer break, which may influence some people who are thinking of it in the future. But to my students and to all the Sheridan students that I'm teaching, all the first semester students at the moment. So I'm teaching the new keen students. And first of all, welcome. And we're so glad to be back to campus. We were back in last spring, summer. We were one of the early programs to go back. Even I think this might be it's hard to remember, but we were early back. I think other than nursing, we were pretty much the first program back on campus because we wanted to return to campus. That said, we are still doing the hybrid delivery pilot project, and we're learning from it too as it goes along. So we are currently offering for first semester students the mandatory general education course, Introduction to Sociology, is entirely online. And then as part of the core paralegal program courses, our hybrid delivery first semester courses are torts and contracts. And that's our only substantive law course in first semester, really. So presents its own challenges, but I do love teaching that course. And when I became coordinator, you give up some things, and that's when I kind of miss. I miss teaching it and leading that course. But there's a lot more admin and program coordination, as I'm sure you know. So I would say the other one is the small claims court practice and procedure one. That's our other first semester one that is part of the hybrid delivery pilot project. And I'm hearing different things from students. Students will say they really love the online learning. Some students will say they prefer in campus. And I hear different things from the people teaching it as well. So I'm really interested to see what the Law Society does going forward. But I do think post-pandemic, it's the way of the future. It's not likely to disappear. I see that there's been correspondence with the Law Society about what's going to happen. And essentially it's continue doing what you're doing until you're told otherwise. And we'll give you plenty of notice before you're told otherwise. So I would say that it's here to stay. And it's a different type of hybrid learning than Sheridan did in the pandemic, because in the pandemic, we used our own learning platform. And now the instructors are teaching with Zoom and Teams. And again, some prefer Teams and some prefer Zoom. And to me, we're giving our students the best of both worlds, teaching in both in first semester. Their summer classes are in Zoom, some are in MS Teams. And that's the way it might be for courts and tribunals, right? So they'll get the experience that they need to go in breakout rooms, for example, and that kind of thing. And me not having taught with either, because I haven't yet delivered a hybrid course. I'm slated to do that in January for the first time. It's exciting and a little daunting too.
Yeah, I find that the hardest is trying to keep track of everything on the screen, right, in your notes. Whereas you'd have a big I mean, I know I've seen models where it's done in the classroom, like the instructor's in a classroom, an empty classroom, right? And then everyone's so you still kind of have those supports, but it's a little different when you're looking at the screen there and looking at 30 faces, hopefully 30 faces on there all on camera. So it is interesting, and I think it certainly gives opportunities for those who may have had other commitments, and they work or family commitments, and that extra bit of time or the commuting time that's saved, one day a week or one class a week, may make sense there for them, right?
It's true. It makes a lot of sense. That it also gives a different meaning to professionalism. For instance, I had to find a room in my house today that would work for this podcast. And normally I have a dog underneath my desk, and sometimes my dog is snoring and things are happening in the background. And same with my students, right? It's a whole different world. It brings the students a little bit into your life, a little, if you will. It's different than I'm used to. I'm used to sort of really compartmentalizing and thinking, okay, now I'm in the classroom. I don't even check my phone, and I never have time in the breaks because students have questions in the break and that kind of thing. And I don't really go anywhere. I'm in the classroom for that 3 hours. And honestly, anyone who knows me doesn't call me, doesn't text me. There's no point to it. They can't reach me. I'm used to that dividing line, and it's not going to be there anymore. Things are different. Meetings are different. People's children appear in meetings now, and we wouldn't see them before. Their pets, all kinds of things. Mine tried a few minutes ago to bang her way into the door.
And it's another thing there. One of the first semester, I mean, typically first semester classes, at the public colleges, you get legal writing, legal research and writing, or even legal drafting. And coming with your English background, how do you find, in seeing, that transition? Some students are coming from, universities where they may have had similar majors where they're writing, theses, and now it's like legal writing, where that transition and sometimes it might be unlearning some of the ways, or even the citations. The biggest thing is, this is the McGill guide. Forget about APA and MLA in Chicago.
Yes.
Here's how you have to cite things. What have you found there from your unique experience and background with that course?
That is one of the courses I lead, Principles of Lead. We have a few writing courses in our program. It is one of the things that I think distinguishes Sheridan a bit from some other of the colleges. I mean, all of us have to teach the same core courses, but we have a first semester Principles of Legal Writing 1, then a second semester Principles of Legal Writing 2. And during second semester, they're also being taught, of course, legal research and writing. So we do put a little bit more emphasis on writing. And I lead the first one of those, the Principles of Legal Writing 1, used to lead legal research and writing. So I would say that with the students who come with those university degrees and they've already done a lot of writing, the learning curve is citations, but that's not for us until second semester when it's taught jointly with legal research and writing. At this point, I say, this is where you can access our summary of the McGill Guide. Professor Romano has kindly prepared a summary of the McGill Guide, which we post for our students. And I say, just take a stab at it right now. It's first semester. I'm really worried about academic integrity. As long as you try to cite something, I have no worries. You've attempted it. In second semester, we're going to get picky with you. We're going to build to it. And you'll have that course happening at the same time, as our second semester Principles of Legal Writing course. So then we're going to get picky about citations. Once you've learned it, we expect you to assimilate it and to keep it throughout the program, not to forget it. You can't. You need it. You need it throughout. You think, oh, first semester torts and contracts, I only need it for torts and contracts. Well, I'm using it in Principles of Legal Writing all the time. What are the elements of this tort? How would you write this pleading to persuade someone that your action in defamation ought to be successful, your libel action, or is it a slander action? What's the difference? What do you have to prove with respect to damages in one versus the other? So I'm using it all the time. But of course, the classes are right now at Sheridan a little bit larger than they have been in a while. And we're actually splitting out the writing course as one of the courses that we need another section, because those writing classes, the one-on-one instruction is really important. And something new we've done that really helps students of all abilities in all levels is we have an embedded tutor in that first semester writing course. And that person is a peer tutor, someone who has succeeded in that course and is attending all the classes. So hearing what I'm telling my students, seeing the assignments that they get, they can email them through their course learning management system. There's a lot of accessibility there. So I'm not alone either as an instructor. They can come to me for help, but sometimes they'd rather go to a peer, and that's available to them. So I think that having those resources, we also have a tutoring center for just drop-in English, but the legal writing is different. The legal writing needs its own legal writing tutor, and I'm really pleased we started doing that just about a semester ago, and I'm really pleased with the way it's been working out. And I'll incentivize, I'll say, all right, if I think I've looked at your draft, because in first semester I comment on drafts, I'll look at your draft and I'll say, I think you need to see the tutor. And if you see the tutor, your assignment is due next week instead of at 6 p.m. today, right? And just to try and get people going and getting in the habit of getting the help that they need. and realizing that even if you have that university degree, maybe you need the help because your writing is too long and I've set a 2-page limit. And sometimes that's what it is, that university degree. I'm inclined to having all these degrees. I'm inclined to write too much and I have to go back and edit myself. And I tell my students that just be aware of what your weaknesses are because we all have them. The comma and the run-on sentence and those the comma slice, those were mine all through all my degrees. Like I would get papers circled in red with things like that marked up on them. So you know what your weaknesses are and then you learn how to fix them.
Yeah, that's certainly unique there in terms of some of the things there. And I mean, I don't know if there's anything else maybe in terms of highlighting, we're talking about the program there, that, obviously there are the core courses that, are required by the Law Society. But I mean, whether it's other courses, whether it's things like peer tutors and things of that nature, anything else you want to highlight, for any first semester students who may come across this, or even prospective students one day and want to know more about the program, anything that you can touch on that would be beneficial for them?
Sure. So all our courses are, well, we essentially have 6 courses each semester. They're all 3 hours long, and they can technically be scheduled anywhere from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. because it's a full-time program. So sometimes people come into our program thinking they're going to be able to hold a full-time job and attend all their classes, and they realize that that's not feasible. So that's something maybe to know from the outset, that we are a full-time program. We will assign your schedule in first semester, and there's limited ability to swap sections for a week or so when the semester starts. But if people want to be guaranteed a clear day, that's not likely to happen. And in subsequent semesters, it may well happen because the Law Society has constraints with respect to how many hours we meet. And then if there are too many statutory holidays, we have to be careful not to schedule our courses on, say, a Monday in fall where there's a couple of statutory holidays. So in the upper semesters, maybe you'll get a day off for, but we don't guarantee that that will happen. And sometimes students, I think, burden themselves a bit. They give themselves 3 courses in a day because they want to clear a day, but I don't know how much they get done on that day because I would be exhausted. If I teach 2 classes, I'm exhausted. So I just want to say that when you decide to study and this is the career you want, you need to dedicate yourself to that career. I want you to be in class. I want you to be learning from each other as much as your instructor. And I want you to maintain that passion that you have. And I don't know if you can do it if you've got 9 hours of classes in one day. I couldn't.
So in terms of obviously the progression through the program, I mean, now you've just had, I think some students would have finished off in April or May, or I'm not sure the exact end date, and went on to their internship and then perhaps went and wrote their licensing exam. I know the results came out last week, and I was certainly saying, there's lots of students that come back and share or post, and you feel like congratulations to them for passing the exam. So maybe talk about kind of what's the next step, right? Because some of them, like I got some message there about doing oaths and paperwork, and then they're gonna get the the thing to hang up on the wall and then go from there. So what can you share with any of your students who are in the same position now, just got licensed, and apart from the congratulation messages on LinkedIn. I don't know if he's been sort of conspicuously absent, but I used to know Robert Bird would be like, I don't know if he had like some alert that like literally 5 seconds later you got a welcome to the profession message from or comment from him. But what's the next steps there, and what can you share with your students who've just passed the exam?
Well, I guess the next step is to really think about what you want to do for most of your working hours, right? Because now you're entering into this profession and you want to be happy in your work. You want to enjoy what you're doing. You want to be challenged. You want to be happy. And of course, you'll probably be a bit overwhelmed because you're new. But right now, the job market's pretty good. So this is different advice than I might give to other students, but I think you can be other alumni. I think you can be a little bit picky. You want to find a place that fits you now and that you can see yourself working for hopefully 5 years in the future and gaining all the skills you want. And then maybe eventually you want to open your own practice, as some of our alumni have done. And maybe you know that that's never going to be for you. That's fine either way. Why did you get into this? Do you want to help people access justice? What do you want to do? Do you want to exercise your advocacy skills? Or during your time in the program, did you realize that you actually like working behind the scenes and you like drafting and you like spending time catching other people's mistakes, proofreading, correcting other people? All of those skills can be utilized in all different ways. There's so many options open to people. Some of our alumni go on to work in some really interesting fields. We have people working for insurance companies. We have people working for insurance defense companies. We do an alumni panel every year. And it's been virtual for the past few years, and it's great because then people can attend no matter what they're doing. And we have alumni from different fields and doing different things come and talk to our students in a virtual setting. And it's been in a panel setting where I solicit questions from students. And then we ask the panel, which questions would you like to answer? And they do answer them. And then there's an open question period at the end. And these are amazing. The things that our alumni have gone on to do, things I wouldn't even have thought. There's someone in gaming, for example. I wouldn't have known about these if I hadn't had the one piece of social media that I utilize, which is LinkedIn. So every now and then I'll do 24 hours of LinkedIn messaging to alumni to line up a panel. And I'll probably have enough to line up 2 panels because they're doing such great things.
Yeah, the perfect segue perhaps into the second half here, which is talking about the practice management text there that is taught, I think, in most, if not almost all the paralegal programs, their practice management course. So will you tell us a little bit background of that? And I know the book's gotten thicker and thicker, maybe to the chagrin of the students, right? That there's more to cover now, but a little bit more about the book and how that came about and what's inside.
Sure. And it has gotten thicker, but I would say it's, I compare it to some of the others. I'm using right now the small claims textbook to get my camera up to the right height because otherwise I don't like the angle. So that small claims textbook is useful in so many ways. but so my practice management book, I'm going to hold it up. There it is. That's fine. The thing that changed this time around is I was too busy to finish it by myself. So I brought in a wonderful author I worked with in legal publishing, Rosemary Boxcus. I just want to comment and acknowledge her contribution to the text, even though I'm the one here speaking to you today. She's absolutely amazing. And she saved my bacon at the end when things were just so busy. And I hate being behind deadline. I honestly do. So what's changed? Well, the rules are changing all the time. The cases that interpret the rules are constantly being added. So I like to add a lot of cases to the textbook. But the biggest change is that because I've never had my own practice and never will at this point in my career, we went out and did what we do with our alumni in a virtual setting in a career panel. We did this for the textbook. So we have profiles of people who are either running law firms or paralegal firms, but are running their own business. And I came up with a set of questions that I thought I would like them all to answer. And it's the same kind of thing. It's like a little interview where you read them and you see their pictures, and they're doing different things. They're doing, horse racing tribunal work, and they've got their own practices, and they haven't graduated all that long ago, at least in my mind. so some of them, and then some of them graduated when I was first teaching them. And so we've got some alumni. And then, of course, I didn't teach all of them. There's Samantha Glass and some other contributors, very notable paralegals who are out there educating as well. I think, and so that's a big thing for me. And I think that was a great recommendation from Iman to do something that they had done in some of their policing textbooks. And when I saw that, I thought, why did I never think of that before? So this is not even my idea. I claim no credit whatsoever. And then I started lining people up, and then even Iman took over and helped out because, again, busy. But that, I think, is the biggest thing. So the rules will always be changing. right? If you include the rules at the end of the textbook, you guarantee that in next time around that when the course is taught, you're going to still have to download them all and distribute them to your students or let them use them online or whatever. And the rules with the guidelines. I think that's so important, that the guidelines are there to help interpret the rules. So if I just read a rule, great, but what I think the rule means might not be what the Law Society says it means in the guidelines, right? So you want them together, and then you want to look at case law, and then knowing even that it's still not going to cover every possible situation. So what's the principle behind the rules? And the principle behind the rules is not to protect licensees, it's to protect members of the public in their dealings with licensees. So then you need to take a step back when you leave the classroom and you're in the world. Those rules should be considered in every single class that you're in. They're not unique to ethics, they're not unique to practice management, although we teach those courses in the same semester, and there's quite a bit of overlap, deliberately so, I'm sure, by the Law Society's design. So they should be everywhere. I teach Principles of Legal Writing 1. I'm talking about tone and civility and correspondence and the rules. And I've read some examples of cases where there's been correspondence appended, and it's appalling, right? I don't want to be reading about one of my students. I say this to them. I say, I don't want to read about one of you in an ethics class, or I don't want to be featuring you in my practice management textbook as what not to do one day. So that's, I think, what's changed the most. But then, of course, there's always things changing. So the rules about advertising changed. There's a working committee on that. Now we're talking about notarization and remote commissioning. All kinds of things have changed because of COVID. And a lot of those changes are exciting and long overdue.
So you point out obviously that the concern, right, is you never want to see someone being featured for the wrong reasons. But again, we were just talking about people just getting licensed, and for some they then make that step into starting their own practice. And I often from even in this class, if you're going to develop a business plan, why don't you make it like your real business plan? It's where your school kind of will then prepare you directly for when you have to go through this analysis, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it may be, if you're ever going to start your own practice. So getting into that, then what are some of the maybe tips or advice from either from the book or from the experiences you've had talking to all of these the different profiles and former students and alumni, some of the things that they tell you, here's what you should be doing. And even from learning from others' mistakes, where you see people either they jump right into like a expensive bricks and mortar office, and it turns out they're spending all their money already when they don't necessarily need to, or maybe something else. But that's an example that others have shared with me, right? Is that kind of build in stages there. But what do you have for any of the students listening, or any of those who just got licensed and are thinking that's the next step they'd like to make now once they get their stamps and diplomas, the Law Society license up on the wall? What will you share with them?
What I've heard from a lot of our alumni is that they are ready to run a paralegal practice if they've run a business before. But sometimes running a paralegal practice is thrust upon them. So I have had some alumni who their job searches didn't pan out the way they thought they would, and they decided to start this kind of a business. But they eased into it, and they were able to take advantage of the pandemic, not to have that bricks and mortar premises and not to spend quite so much money to get that start and get the ball rolling. All of the alumni who've gone on to establish practices have commented on the way this course prepared them, and it was that business plan assignment. You're right on point. I would say that I don't make my students go into the details of how much this rent would be, but there's bonus material that they can provide. And some of them have gone on to do that. And some of them have really researched the premises. But since the pandemic, a lot of them are thinking, we're not going to rent the big money. I'm not going to spend all that money on rent or pay all that money on rent. I am going to try and run it as from home. I'm going to set up a room in my home and run it from there, home-based businesses. So when I revised the textbook, that was in my mind as well. And I added quite a bit more on home-based businesses because it just seems to be the way of the future. If even the big banks are scaling back on their premises, and with all the money that they report in their profits all the time, then this is the way of the future. If banking employees are going back only 3 days a week now, then 2 days they're at home, right? So this is going to happen everywhere. And do you need those bricks and mortar premises at all? Can you just rent meeting space as long as you've got confidential area in which to meet? So there's different things that people can do. And I suppose what I hear most from the alumni is that if they already ran a business, and that's a lot of our mature students, and we have a good third of our students in our program are mature students. So they felt that they had already got that business experience and that basis, and they felt ready right away. And others did extra things. They took some courses sometimes beyond the college about running a business. Right? Paralegal businesses obviously have their own obligations, restrictions, particularly with accounting. And we spent a lot of time on that in our accounting class, our legal accounting class, but a little bit as well as required in practice management. And in real life, you can't have a practice if you don't understand math. And I dropped math in grade 11, which is something I tell everybody. I dropped math in grade 11 and is not one of my strengths. And I would be extremely cautious about running in my own practice. I don't know if I could catch that kind of fraud that I see and I report in these cases all the time. Trusted employees who then embezzle client funds and that kind of thing. And that's a real responsibility. So maybe you want to work for a few years, even if you think eventually you want your own practice. If you haven't had a business before, then my tip is try to work for a few years for somebody else and learn from that person and watch what's happening around you, not just your little box, not the chores that are assigned to you or the tasks that are assigned to you or the files that you carry, but watch what's happening administratively and what your strengths are and what you develop as you go along. Now, I've taught introduction to computer applications where we do a bit of Excel work, and I had to learn it to teach it. It's not something I've really used much in my life or in my practice, but is it going to be some other practice management software that you adapt? So one of the things that really was interesting when we did all the simulated placements in during COVID was we got our students to educate us about the software that's available for practices, Clio and all kinds of things. And they gave us little demonstrations or presentations about what that software could accomplish, because I haven't practiced even in more than a quarter of a century. Right? It's a long time and things change all the time. And even law, which is fairly slow to change, as I say, the pandemic has changed everything. So I guess I would say it's really different now than the advice that I would give than I would have given even 5 years ago.
Yeah, one of the things certainly when I look at, I mean, I don't know, maybe it might be different in 2023 at law schools. I think we went to the same one maybe years apart, but like we didn't have a practice management course. We didn't have an accounting course. And, it wasn't very practical, right? In terms of, how many lawyers go out and open up their own practice or, even a partnership, on a small scale. And again, are you ready for that? And as you point out, I mean, quite correctly, especially for paralegals, right? It may be, well, what are my choices right now, right? I can either go and work as, a junior paralegal if you're fortunate enough, and then maybe the pendulum, as you say, is swinging a little bit back, where you could be a little bit more picky than before. But if that doesn't pan out, I certainly there are a lot of people who say, well, maybe I'll pause this and I'll come back, in a couple of years, and then it's hard to come back because you're set, maybe you're making, a fairly good chunk of change, and to kind of go back into once you're licensed, you've taken a couple of years out of the sort of paralegal profession, it may not be as feasible as it was, right when you've got licensed. And then of course there are the ones that say, well, maybe the best opportunity is to just start my own practice and sort of a baptism by fire, learn as things go along. In those cases, I mean, what really is important? What do you think is really important there for understanding, now you're running a business, and maybe you don't have those tools. You mentioned certainly getting other courses, but what else
Mhm.
can I guess if your timeline is pretty right out of the gate,
Yeah.
what can you do, and what resources are there for newly licensed paralegals, both from the Law Society and certainly probably from your old professors and classmates even, that you can utilize?
The big thing is the Law Society website. They've added so much for the practice management helpline and practice management material and the courses that the Law Society offers. Just amazing. Even every semester, this is only offered at Sheridan once a year, but every time I'm teaching it, I'm going through to see what's new at the Law Society site, what should I add for the students to the course, because my book couldn't keep up. It's a hard copy or else soft cover, but it's a paper document. There's an ebook as well, but it can't keep up. I've got websites in there and URLs, and I test them, and they're great when you go to print. And then more is added all the time. So the Law Society really has improved, and is just offering a wide array of programs available for people who want to run their own practice. And then there's mentoring, because you can be connected with a mentor, someone maybe who already has a practice, to help you with that. And then sometimes there's organizations that do that as well outside the Law Society, that paralegal organizations may well do it. And there's organizations for female paralegals. And one of the things that I comment on in my textbook is there's a real discrepancy between how many female paralegals are licensed and how many of them run their own practice. And it's more females are licensed, but more males run their own practices. So there's a gender disparity there. And I wonder why. I don't really have a position to take on it. I just raise the question for discussion and for contemplation more. Is it because of that taking time out of the workforce that traditionally happens when women have children, which is it changed in a little bit over time, but not as much as you might think it would have. I don't know the reasons behind it. Is it some aversion to risk taking? I honestly don't know, but it's there. The statistics from the Law Society's annual reports tell me it's there, and I'll look at them again when they come out and see what's happened out there in the world. And when I next update the textbook, I'll use the most recent stats to see what's going on. But I don't see that changing.
Yeah, I mean, we just actually covered that last week. We had a nice discussion. I mean, the other thing was, I think from those same numbers, we did the math, and I think it was like 38.5% of licensed paralegals are practicing, right? And so those are concerning. I mean, like I was saying, well, imagine if this was the first day of school, and I'm telling you, you know, uh, there's obviously the trickle down effect of how many finish the program, how many write the licensing exam, how many are successful maybe on their first time, or how many are successful in the end. And then you get licensed, and then after all that attrition, like the funnel, 4 out of 10, are going to be practicing in that field. And we don't really have any data. And I mean, really, I'm curious. And I know I've talked with, Barbara there from your college about it, right? As to where are the other six, and what are they doing? Because, you can have law adjacent, we're in law adjacent roles, right? That
Mhm.
you don't necessarily need to be practicing to be making use of your education and your license. But that also factors in, right? Because again, you point out that there's this, if you look at your classroom in terms of the diversity in the class, and then if you're looking at the sole practitioners, as you've pointed out, and it doesn't reflect that, what are the reasons, and what can we do to maybe culture and foster the same uh, dynamic in our classrooms as we would get then in those who are providing legal services as sole proprietors, or self practitioners, right?
Mhm.
What I don't know if you've given any other thought in terms of that. In both, though, you could put on the program coordinator hat, and certainly that aspect, but as well as in terms of practice management. Is it there, like that fear or risk adverse there for anybody, of, okay, well, if I can't get a 9 to 5 sort of, or whatever, position at a firm, maybe I'm looking at something else than staying as a paralegal.
Right. And see, as someone who comes from really quite a non-traditional background, I think I was at a law school where at the time it was 51% females and 49% males at that particular intake, in that particular intake. And I don't think all that many women are practicing still. So I've seen it's for a long time, not just in the paralegal profession. Now I'm seeing it there, but with women not practicing in traditional ways. And certainly for me, I know one of those factors was not wanting to work the 60-hour work week, right? Not wanting that. And it's really hard to disengage when you have your own practice because you need that client base, you need to keep working on it, developing it, and you need that flow of income, right? That's what you're depending on. So I've given it a lot of thought, how to foster, how to take that beyond the classroom. I will almost always have more females than males in my classrooms. I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but pretty much it usually is. And then the same thing, but they're going out and they're doing really interesting things, and it's not necessarily practicing. As I say, some of them are policy for the government. They want the 9 to 5. Some of them are in the courts working as court staff. Quite a few of ours are in the Brampton courts, actually. We're pretty close to Brampton, the Brampton courts. So I have quite a few alumni there. Some of them are doing transcription, some of them are court clerks and court staff and all different things. And then some of them are law clerks, but in law firms rather than practicing as paralegals. And some of them enjoy that. And then some of them are thinking that's a stepping stone to maybe being a paralegal later, or in the full sense of the word, being that advocate and having your own client base. And then on our PAC committee, Professional Advisory Council, we have a paralegal who was the first person to be made a partner in a law firm in Ontario, which is fabulous. So I see things changing in some positive ways, but incrementally, slowly. And I do wonder what's happening to those people who don't decide to practice at all, right? And some of them I know from our students are going on to further education. So they're not even getting that license yet. They're going on to do the degree program at one of the other institutions that offer it, or they're going on to related education. And a very few of them will go to law schools overseas and that kind of thing. And some go to Canadian law schools as well, if they have already got university degrees, because I keep saying paralegals. For those of you who are considering the paralegal profession, it's not a traditional pathway to becoming a lawyer, right? It takes you to become a paralegal, and there are different requirements to become a lawyer. And that's one of the questions I get a lot when we have an open house session at Sheridan and people are asking questions about the program and they know they're interested in law, but then does this cut out a couple of years on my way to becoming a lawyer? And it really doesn't. Right. It actually it's very useful, the skills that you develop in this program. They will transfer really well, but it's not going to save you any time.
Yeah, I often get that question. Like, I'm thinking about law school, so could any of these courses, and the answer is that I can't speak for the law schools, but the general answer is no, right? I mean, they have requirements, and I mean, I think the biggest advantage, obviously, is that you can practice, within your scope, and for a lot of, depending on your interest, that may be a significant overlap of what lawyers can do after law school, right? If you wanted to have, for example, a practice in the human rights, or in workplace injuries, that whole practice can be done as a paralegal, at the WSIAT and the HRTO, an assortment of other tribunals. And going to law school is not going to necessarily change the kind of work you can do now, albeit if you want to do wills and estates and corporate commercial and real estate, right? Of course. But that's one of the discussions, certainly in practice management, right? Is what kind of practice do you want? And I mean, I don't know in terms of how set students are coming into that course, or coming into the program, of what they want to do, right? You said, if you asked many years ago, right, that 5 years from now I'd like to get into teaching. If you ask your students now, 5 years from now, once you finish this program, what kind of practice would you like, or would you like to be practicing, that answer I think might be different for a lot of the students. And how do you encompass that in a practice management course and in the
Mhm.
program, and cover those kinds of materials there broadly, because it's very difficult when everyone kind of has a little different take on their future
Yeah.
with the paralegal program.
It was certainly difficult for me in law school. I took all these constitutional law courses because I was so very interested in constitutional law. And then it was about 10 years before I used any constitutional law in my life and in my working life. And yes, it was good to know a little bit about it at that point, but for 10 years I didn't get to do it. And I think that when our practice management course is offered its third semester, students are starting to think about their placements. They're trying to refine their areas of interest, but there's still some core courses that have yet to come. So we do have a special topics course that's not really a core course, but it's a 4 semester course, and it discusses the Lucy Act, for example, and it discusses statutory accident benefits. And they don't necessarily know if they're interested in it until they do that course, and that also has the immigration module. And that might be when the light bulb sort of switches on, and I would like to do a placement in this and then see if I'm interested. And a lot of times students even go out on placement thinking they're interested in something, and then at the end I get to read a lot of the placement reports, my absolute favorite kind of grading, and I see that they've decided, no, this isn't for me. Or they've decided, absolutely, this is for me, provincial offenses all the way. This is what I want to do. But a lot of these courses, again, don't happen until third semester, fourth semester. They're still really refining their interests and thinking about it. And then some students might want to have a placement that's more general and that does different things so that they can figure it out in that time that they have to spend at the placement and see to what they're most drawn. And that's what that's there for. I thought I had one idea of my future, and it changed in my first year of actually practicing as a lawyer, and it changed drastically. And it really was just looking around the room, the office on a Sunday and thinking, I'm here every Sunday. The only Sunday I get off, the only day I get off each week is Saturday. I don't think I want this to be the rest of my life. Well, that sometimes happens, right? That's what we encounter. So when we talk about practice management, we start thinking, all right, well, think of what you're interested in now, knowing that that's going to evolve and change as you grow and change and learn more and do more out there in the world. And maybe you're fortunate to get connected with a wonderful mentor in summary conviction law. But again, that's later in the program, right? So maybe that's going to be your area that interests you the most. I don't think you can fully know at the time that we offer our course, right? But I do think it makes a lot of sense to offer it in that semester with the ethics overlap. I think that it's constantly reinforcing the rules and the guidelines, and I think that's very important. But in terms of, you can take your business plan, but you might have to change the areas of law, and you might then have to do more market research. And you might even decide that you're going to not really restrict the location so much, because now you can be mobile. You can do mobile notarizing, commissioning, whatever, right? So a lot of things can happen. I think in the classroom, it's more about laying the foundation and knowing where they can look going forward.
Yeah, and certainly you're going to revise those ideas uh, as things get changed, rules get changed, or you have a pandemic, and you're like, well, I can be set up, outside of Toronto and still have clients in Toronto over Zoom meeting them, and I can do this, and I can verify things virtually, and I don't need to come in and even meet them. In some cases, I mean, that might also be the flip. Well, some people now are kind of turning back to, I miss the in-person meetings and coming into an office. It's been 3 years of Zoom and Teams, and I know courts are going to be like that. But I'd like to go and meet my paralegal in person. So,
Mhm.
how do you kind of navigate this changing dynamic? And that's something to certainly think about, when you're going to build a practice. How how flexible you can be to your client base, and again, also without running afoul of the law society rules, right? You still got to reconcile your trust accounts, and you still got to ensure your duty of confidentiality is protected. So you can't say, well, I'm going to just meet a bunch of clients in Tim Hortons or something, because that's going to run you afoul of the rules. So I mean, anything else, I guess, in terms of the text there, that you'd like to hide? I mean, certainly the profiles, and I think now my new thing for this semester is try to reach out to the ones I haven't spoke to, and maybe I can have a whole series of all the profiles,
That'd be
that they
great.
can fill in with some of those questions they've answered. But anything else you want to highlight for students
I think
in
the very
particular?
beginning talks about knowing yourself, really knowing whether this is for you, and doing that entrepreneur quiz. Are you an entrepreneur? Should you be? Do you feel pressured to be an entrepreneur? And also know that a lot of people are going to know that you're in the paralegal program, and they're going to come for you to seek legal advice. What's your level of comfort engaging in that practice? Do you think you're ready now? Do you think you can become ready? Do you need more training to get there? Because people you know, people you don't know, you have that obligation to represent them competently and to meet the Law Society's competencies in the broadest sense of the word, and to do a good job. And I think that many people aren't going to be confident doing that right away. So I think a lot of people are going to take that time, and it'll be 3 years post graduation, 5 years post graduation, post licensing, even before they're ready to run a practice. But when you do it, you don't have to be alone. The textbook talks about that, and the Law Society has so many resources for you. So I suppose it's beyond the textbook too. Like, people probably will sell their textbooks on, they won't keep them. Keep the knowledge, know where the rules are, know what that you need them, bookmark them on the Law Society site. No, you don't download them because they change all the time, right? Go into them fresh each time you view them. Keep your research current, I suppose. That's it.
Perfect. So, Michelle, thanks so much for taking the time and speaking with us today. I have, I guess, my final question there. I guess maybe if you've seen some, it's always kind of the same. Any final words of wisdom for, I mean, anyone listening? I guess maybe you can separate it into two groups, right? The new students that are 2 weeks into the program, or the students, maybe three groups actually. The first semester students that are just starting, the third semester students that are maybe now at practice management,
Yeah.
and then finally the students that are just licensed now, or almost licensed, just the paperwork after going through the exam, or in the last year perhaps, and advice there as they go into the next steps in their career.
I think my advice, okay, I have one piece that I think fits all. And it is, remember that you are your network. The people you're in first semester with, the people you are graduating with, the people you're going through school with, they are forming impressions of your professionalism. As they work with you, they're deciding whether they'd want to work with you again. And if there's a job opportunity at a firm and you're applying and they're already there, of course, the person hiring is going to ask them what they think of you. You want that to be really good. You want them to think it would be wonderful to have you as an addition to the firm, or as a partner in a new firm that they're looking to establish. So you have to behave accordingly. And we understand that life sometimes intervenes and means that maybe the group project that you worked on, you didn't contribute as much that one time, but you need to make up for it the next time then. You need to establish that foundation of professionalism so that people feel confident recommending you, because right now, as I say, the job market's good. People are looking. Maybe they're going to lure you away to even a better position from one you've already got. But they have to want to do that. You have to make them want to do that. You have to be great to work with.
Perfect. So once again, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. Take care.
Thank you.